Hi, my name is Amber Snyder, and today I will be talking to you about concepts in cultivation theory. First, I will discuss what cultivation theory is and concepts of mean world theory, which is a part of cultivation theory and my personal favorite concept within theory. I will present 10 research articles that I have separated into 3 categories, which is the cultivation and self, cultivation and others, and cultivation and the environment and materialism. I will then discuss some limitations of this study, some similarities and dissimilarities, and then I will talk about ideas for a future study, present to you 2 of my proposed hypotheses for future studies, and end with a conclusion. So first, cultivation theory. This theory sets out to find a correlation between the media, which in this case I'm talking specifically about television, and real life. It also discusses permeability, which is kind of how much of what we watch that we do repeat, mimic, or accept as true in part of our daily life. It also talks about exposure and dramas. Exposure is basically how much television we watch and the kinds of television we're exposed to and what we are exposed to in television. Also the genres, it talks about, in a few articles, they discuss specific genres versus general viewing of TV. I also wanted to discuss very quickly the mean world theory, which again is my favorite concept within cultivation theory, which basically talks about how much is true of what we see on television, whether it be TV dramas, crime dramas, or even the news. I kind of like to relate it to the idea that no news is good news. Basically, a lot of the things that we see on television, whether they're a formal news report or a reality TV show or even just a regular drama that has fictional characters, a lot of the times these things portray scary, bad things happening in the world. And that permeates into society thinking that the world is a much scarier place than it actually is. And a few of my articles that I discussed do talk about mean world theory, and a lot of the concepts can be related to that. So the first subsection I will discuss today is cultivation and self. I did find 4 of my 10 articles that I related to this specific subsection regarding yourself. Things such as self-esteem, your view on how you are, and the perceptions of reality of oneself. The first study was done by the International Communications Association. They set out to find out how medical dramas affect people's perceptions and knowledge of general health. They proposed that medical dramas contribute to more fatalistic views of illnesses, such as getting in a car accident or getting something as simple as the flu could actually kill you. And in a lot of medical dramas, it is seen that way, that someone comes in with a splinter in their foot and a week later they are no longer living because of infections and crazy things that happen. It also talks about the views of rare diseases as being more common than ones that are actually the most common, such as lupus being a killer of a lot of people when really the #1 killer is heart disease. So included in this survey was the education level of the participants, which they thought could have an impact on how much people actually believe what is seen on TV. They found all their hypotheses to be confirmed, that viewing medical dramas does give people a more fatalistic stance on society, and that less common diseases society finds to be more pressing than things like heart disease and diabetes, which are very important issues that need to have general knowledge about. They did find that those with higher education actually do gain some more accurate health information from viewing medical dramas as opposed to those of lower education. But they did find too that overall the fatalistic views and the disease commonality is what is really the impact that medical dramas have on their general viewers. The second study in this section of cultivation and self was by Rick and LaCrystal in 2012. They set out to find whether derogatory and negative speech patterns portrayed in Fox's Family Guy can actually permeate into society. They watched the episodes looking for derogatory speech in certain scenes. They wanted to show that there is a high level of derogatory speech in the show, and they did find that out of 6,030 scenes, 533 of those contain derogatory speech. However, because of lack of other research and lack of a definitive number of what is considered high levels, it was hard for them to say whether 533 scenes out of 630 would be considered high or low or in the middle. They did categorize the senders and receivers of the derogatory speech within the television shows, who was saying it and who was receiving the derogatory speech. They found, and they categorized the senders and receivers by race, gender, socioeconomic status, and sexual preference. They did find that straight, white, middle-class, able-bodied men were the most likely to be the senders and receivers of derogatory speech. Now, this could lay to the fact that most of the characters in Fox's Family Guy are white, straight, middle-aged, able-bodied men. However, they did find that similar levels, people who share similar ideas, feelings, beliefs, and looks are more likely to be open about their discussion and say something negative to one another. However, they did find that women were the most likely to retaliate against derogatory speech in this show. So, as an example, if the main character, who was a man, was to say, "Go make me a sandwich," to his wife is more likely to say, "You get your fat butt up and make a sandwich," or "No, I'm not going to do it." The women in the show were most likely to retaliate against this negative speech. The reason they did this study is they felt that the portraying of freely speaking negative thoughts and freely using derogatory speech made it much easier to permeate into society, because society would view that as okay to use language like that with each other. The third study in this section was by Bullens in 2012, and this had to do with exposure to action programs and risk-taking behavior. They did a survey to high school and early college age students, and it was a self-report survey. What they found was that generally high exposure resulted in a high correlation of self-reported risky behavior. So watching action shows that have high levels of risk-taking behavior permeated into an individual's belief that those kinds of behavior are okay. In regards to vehicle safety, the participants reported that they are more likely to speed, not wear a seatbelt, or do things such as using a cell phone while driving, because actions like this portrayed in the television and the media often come with little to no consequence or repercussions, so they felt that those behaviors are acceptable and okay to portray in real life. So this also comes to how media can affect everyday life and permeates into our society. The last study in this section was by Von Vonderen and Kinley in 2012. They were trying to set out to find a correlation between exposure to television and self-esteem. And this actually gave me a hopeful side to cultivation theory, that it's not always negative, and this found that television is actually not the main culprit in low self-esteem. So seeing a skinny model on television or seeing advertisements for plastic surgery is not really what affects a person's self-esteem. They found that peer comparison measured much higher in how people perceive themselves and who they compare themselves to for self-esteem related issues. The next subset I'm going to talk about is cultivation and others. This is basically the media's effect on how we perceive others, associate with others, speak to others, and communicate with others. The first study in 2009 was by Lee and Burchard. They studied television viewing among college students and how it relates to stereotypes of certain ethnic groups. What they found is that there is a higher appreciation and more positive views for Caucasians. They also found that there is a lower appreciation and more negative views for those of the Asian culture. In their study, they did find that African Americans and Native Americans had a pretty equal mix of positive and negative views. They found that these perceptions to be the same regardless of the genre, and they were solely related to general television viewing. So watching a crime drama, watching a medical show, watching a soap opera didn't really have an effect on the difference of how they perceive people of other cultures. Just general television viewing gave more positive feedback to Caucasians, more negative feedback to Asians, and a mix between African Americans and Native Americans. A few years later, Cahor and Easton did a study in 2012 that dealt with the rape myth theory, which is basically people's perceptions on whether rape accusations are true or false. Mostly they believe that rape accusations can be false, they can be over-exaggerated, and that women who dress promiscuously are asking for it. Things like that revolve around the rape myth theory. They proposed that heavy television viewing, along with variables such as being a victim, knowing a victim, or the gender's role, play a big part in perceptions that rape accusations are false and correlate to positive acceptance of rape myth theory. The survey focused on general TV, crime dramas, and soap operas. What they found was that rape myth theory to be accepted in general viewing and soap operas. However, with crime dramas, they found a lower acceptance of rape myth theory that allowed the viewers to believe that accusations could actually be true, that over-exaggerations don't always happen, and that it is not the victim's fault if a rape or a sexual offense does occur. The last study in this section is by Aubrey in 2013, and this has to deal with relational control and interpersonal relationships and how viewing these kinds of arguments and interpersonal conflict on television can affect the control in a relationship or interpersonal conflict. They concluded that those who watch television with high levels of interpersonal conflict will display more relational control within interpersonal relationships, and they found that it was more prominent in people who perceive television as a real reflection of everyday life. They did find that there is no correlation between relational control and watching television to learn about interpersonal interaction. However, those that perceived realism in television displayed did show more control in interpersonal relationships. The last subsection within cultivation theory is cultivation and the environment, or materialism and external factors. The first study was in 2007 by Good, and he proposed that high television viewing will yield lower levels of environmental concern and higher levels of materialism. What she found was that a lack of environmental programming and a lack of the popularity of the few environmental programs that there are directly and negatively relate to society's concern for the environment. As well, she found that this concern lessens in people who responded to being more materialistic. And materialism with commercials and product placement and things like that is a very prominent idea in television and the media and something we're exposed to every day. The second study in this section does refer to the mean world theory that I discussed earlier. And the idea revolves around seeing the world, again, as more dangerous than it actually is. So in 2009, Hammond found that high levels of crime drama viewing showed a cultivation of fear with perceived realism. Basically, those who perceived television, again, as being true and real and factual in everyday life did have a higher level of fear from watching shows such as crime dramas. However, he did find that general viewing did not have an effect on these ideas. But this does support the idea that general viewing and different genre viewings can present different results. Lastly, Dahlstrom and Sheffield in 2010 did a study to hypothesize that the type of television viewed is equally significant to the amount of television viewed. They wanted to find a correlation between the type of programs watched and a concern for the environment. They did find, similar to the first study in this section, that a lack of environmental programming was directly correlated to a lack of environmental concern. However, diversity of genres of shows did find that there was more concern for the environment. So basically, general overall television viewing does cause a lack of concern for the environment. It's directly correlated to that. However, having a diversity in the genre of shows you watch, crime dramas, medical dramas, soap operas, family dramas, does show more concern for the environment because these topics are more likely to be touched on in different programs than in one type of programming. So these studies all found a correlation between real life and television viewing. Some focused on television viewing as a whole, while some focused on specific genres. Something that was lacking in all of these is a determination of how much society views television as reality. Because of this, I proposed two hypotheses to find correlations on TV viewing and perceived realities. The first hypothesis that I proposed states that there is a positive correlation between the amount of television watched and the perception of television as a mirror image of reality. Basically, the amount of television you watch, it is more likely to perceive things on television as being accurate in everyday life. The second theory I proposed is that those who perceive television as a mirror image of reality are more likely to act in a manner portrayed by fictional characters. Similar to the study done with Family Guy, I feel that it is more likely if you view television as being an accurate depiction of everyday life, you're more likely to use these types of speech, types of actions, such as driving while talking on your cell phone without consequence. You're more likely to use these things in your everyday life if you see television as mirroring the way reality actually is. knowledge of these studies and the proposed hypotheses, my hope is that the public can learn from how we find television facts in our everyday life. The realization of these things and the correlations that were presented today can help raise awareness of what we are watching. I feel it's important to realize that TV can affect our health, our interaction with others, our need for materialism, and our lack of concern for the environment. And these are all negative qualities taken from TV. However, if we listen to them and we realize that these things happen, it can bring about more knowledge on how to stop television from permeating into our society and seeing these things as strictly for entertainment as they are supposed to be viewed. In conclusion, these studies show how much television can really affect our society. We discussed earlier cultivation theory and gave a brief definition of it. We talked about the mean world theory, which again is my favorite concept in this. I think it very much portrays how much TV can affect our view of the world. I spoke of the 3 categories I chose to organize my 10 articles in, which focused on cultivation theory in yourself, cultivation theory in your interaction with others, and cultivation theory in the environment, materialism, and external factors. I also discussed the limitations of our studies, and I proposed some future research and hypotheses to start thinking about different ways television affects our society. And that is everything on cultivation theory. Thank you.